So now we have a lot of the tools that we need to start solving more complicated quadratic equations. So let's take a look at a couple simpler examples of this. Here we have 5x squared minus 10x is equal to 0. And we want to figure out which values of x will make this equation equal to 0. So the first thing you should usually do whenever you're given something like this is you want to try to, if it's not set equal to 0, you want to set it equal to 0. That's always your first rule of thumb. You need to make sure that your equation is set equal to 0. Otherwise, you're going to have a really hard time solving it. Okay, and then the next thing you want to do is you want to try and factor the equation as much as you possibly can. So here we have 5x squared minus 10x is equal to 0. Okay, this is going to be the same thing as, let's see what we can factor out here. Well, we know that with that, let's find a greatest common factor here. So if we pull it looks like we should be able to pull a 5x out of this, right? Because 5x squared is divisible by 5x, and 10x is also divisible by 5x. So we can rewrite this as 5x times x minus 2 is equal to 0. Okay? And again, you can double check this to make sure this works. If you redistribute the 5x to the x, you'll get 5x squared, and then 5x to the minus 2, and you'll get minus 10x. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what this is going to look like. So the 5x term here, sorry, let's back up a little bit. We have two terms here. We have 5x and we have x minus 2. So the idea is we want to set each of these equal to 0. So we have 5x is equal to 0, and we have x minus 2 is equal to 0. Okay, so for 5x is equal to 0, we should just be able to divide both sides of the equation by 5. Okay, and 0 divided by 5 is just 0. So we have x is equal to 0. So if x is equal to 0, then this whole thing is equal to 0. Okay, but we can also solve this one. So we can have adding 2 on both sides. So we have x is equal to positive 2. So x equals 0 and x equals positive 2 are both totally valid solutions to this equation. And I actually wanted to run through this real quick just to demonstrate that this actually does work. If we go back to the initial equation we have here, 5x squared minus 10x is equal to 0, let's plug in x equals 0 and see what happens. If we have 5 times 0 squared minus 10 times 0, this is going to be the same thing as 5 times 0, which is 0, minus 10 times 0, which is 0. So therefore, we have 0 minus 0, which is 0. Okay, and then for 2, this is probably the more interesting one. If we have 5, let's move this one down a little bit. 5 times 2 squared minus 10 times 2, that's equal to 5 times 4 minus 20, which is equal to 20 minus 20, which is 0. So we can see that x equals 0 and x equals 2 would both make this equation equal to 0. Okay, now let's look at this one. Here we have w squared is equal to 15w. So again, remember, the first thing we need to do is we need to set the whole equation equal to 0. So the way we want to do this is we want to go ahead and take 15w away from both sides. And that's going to give us w squared minus 15w is equal to 0. And then from here, what we can do is we can factor out a w. So this will become w times w minus 15. And now we'll set both w and w minus 15 equal to 0. So we have w equals 0, and we already have one of our solutions right away. Okay, and we also have w minus 15 is equal to 0. So hopefully we can see pretty quickly that w is going to be equal to 15. So we have w equals 0 and w equals 15 as both valid solutions. Okay, so let's look at a slightly more complicated example. Here we have y squared plus 2y minus 8 is equal to 0. So it's a little more complicated, but this is nothing we have all of the tools we need to be able to solve this particular equation. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we notice that it's already set equal to 0, so we're good there. We don't have to do anything else on that front. but we do have to see if we can factor this equation. So we know that we can factor this. So if we want to factor, let's start this, factor y squared plus 2y minus 8. We need to find two numbers that multiply together to give us negative 8 and add together to give us 2. Okay, so what two numbers would multiply together to give us negative 8 and would add together to give us 2? Okay, well, we could do 4 and negative 2. So if you take 4 times negative 2, we get negative 8, and then if you add negative 2 to 4, you get positive 2. So we can actually write this as y plus 4 times y minus 2. Therefore, this is the same thing as y plus 4 times y minus 2 is equal to 0. These two are equal. Okay, and now we have two terms here. We're going to each set equal to 0. We have y plus 4 is equal to 0. So we can take 4 away from both sides, and we get y is equal to negative 4. And then we have y minus 2 is equal to 0. And we can add 2 to both sides, and we have y is equal to 2. So y equals negative 4 and y equals 2 are both totally valid solutions for this equation. Okay. Now let's take a look at this one. Here we have x squared plus x minus 20 is equal to 0. So it's set equal to 0, so we're good there. And now all we have to do is factor the left-hand side here. So we need to find two numbers that multiply we're going to find two numbers that multiply together to give us negative 20 and add together to give us 1. Okay, so numbers that will multiply together to give us negative 20, 5 and negative 4 should do that job. If you multiply 5 times negative 4, we get negative 20, and if we add 5 and negative 4, we get 1. So we can write this as x plus 5 times x minus 4. Okay, and we're setting this equal to 0, so this is going to become x plus 5 times x minus 4 is equal to 0, and therefore we have x plus 5 is equal to 0, and x minus 4 is equal to 0. So from here we can take 5 away, and that's going to give us that x is equal to negative 5. And here we can add 4, and we get x is equal to 4. So x equals negative 5 and x equals 4 are both solutions to this equation. Let's look at this one. Here we have 2x squared plus 7v plus 6 is equal to 0. Okay, so it looks like here we're going to have to use the actual full AC method. So here we have a is equal to 2, b is equal to 7, and c is equal to 6. And then we have a times c is equal to 2 times 6, so that is equal to 12. Okay, so we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give us a times c, or 12, and add together to give us 7. Okay, I'm thinking 3 and 4 here would be good. So 3 times 4 gives us 12, 3 plus 4 gives us 7. So we can go ahead and write this as 2x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 6. And just as a reminder from the previous video where we talked about this, this doesn't change the value of anything. And the reason it doesn't change the value of anything is because 4x plus 3x is equal to 7. Well, I put a v here. I should have put an x. Sorry about that. Yeah, 4x plus 3x is equal to 7x. So nothing really changes. All we're doing is splitting up that middle term. Okay, so from here, we can go ahead and factor this. So let's put some parentheses here and here. So for this first set of parentheses here, 2x squared plus 4x, we can factor out a 2x. If we factor out a 2x, we'll end up with x plus 2. And then for the second one here, we can factor out a 3. So we have a 3. And if we factor out 3, that's going to give us x plus 2. And we'll notice now we have x plus 2 and x plus 2. So now we can factor out an x plus 2 from this whole thing. So we'll have x plus 2 times 2x plus 3. And if you remember, this whole thing is equal to 0. So now we can set each of these equal to 0. So we have x plus 2 is equal to 0. So we can take 2 away from both sides, and we'll end up with x is equal to negative 2. And then we have 2x plus 3 is equal to 0. So from here, we can take away 3 from both sides, and we have 2x is equal to negative 3. And now we can divide both sides by 2, and we end up with x is equal to negative 3 halves. So x equals negative 2 and x equals negative 3 halves are both solutions here. Okay, let's do one more. Here we have 5x squared minus 24x is equal to 5. Okay, so remember here, we have to make sure that the whole thing is set equal to 0 before we can start solving anything. Don't give into the temptation to try and solve it equal to 5. We need to move this 5 over to the other side. So that's going to give us 5x squared minus 24x minus 5 is equal to 0. Okay, and so now we're going to, looks like probably the AC method is the way to go. So we have A is equal to 5, B is equal to negative 24, and C is equal to negative 5. Okay, so we also have AC, A times C, is equal to 5 times negative 5, so we get negative 25. Okay, so now we need to find two numbers that multiply together to give us negative 25 and add together to give us negative 24. So I am thinking negative 25 and 1. So negative 25 times 1 is negative 25, and negative 25 plus 1 is negative 24. So we can rewrite this as 5x squared minus 25x plus x minus 5 is equal to 0. Okay, and the plus x here comes from the other number being 1. It's plus 1x is how we can think of that. So now we can split this up. So for this first term here, we can pull out, we can pull out a 5x. So we have 5x times, looks like it'll be x minus 5 plus x minus 5. And it looks like from here we can factor out an x minus 5. So we're going to end up with x minus 5 times 5x plus 1. And this is equal to 0. So that means we're going to set each of these equal to 0. So we have x minus 5 is equal to 0. We can add 5 to both sides, and we get x is equal to 5. We also have 5x plus 1 is equal to 0. We can take 1 away from both sides, and we get 5x is equal to negative 1. So we can divide both sides by 5, and we get x is equal to negative 1/5. So x equals 5 and x equals negative 1/5 are both solutions here.